On the 24th of July, 24 companies put their names to a single document, arguing that the most powerful artificial intelligence models in the world should be freely downloadable by anyone who wants them. It is a genuinely persuasive document. It talks about competition and access, and American leadership, and about keeping a world-changing technology out of the hands of a tiny few. It reads like a letter written on behalf of the public. And the signature I want you to stare at in that long and respectable list is NVIDIA's. Because NVIDIA does not make these models, it makes the machines they run on. Now, I should say where I stand, because I am going to spend most of this video as a devil's advocate. I think several of the arguments in that letter are entirely correct, and I will defend them before the end. But I also think that some of them are a commercial interest wearing the costume of a public one. And I think the single most commercially interested signature on the entire page belongs to the company that, no matter who wins or loses this race, sells the shovels. My job for the next 20 minutes is to show you exactly where the costume does not quite fit. Because there is a puzzle sitting underneath all of this, and the letter is careful never to mention it. The companies that actually build these frontier models are, at this moment, losing simply staggering amounts of money. One leading lab lost around $5 billion in a single year. A close rival lost more than that. One well-known company spent more than its entire annual revenue just renting the computers needed to answer its users. And the cost of training a single new frontier model is now heading past $1 billion a time. So hold that in your mind. The thing being made here is one of the most expensive products in the history of business, and it is being made at a colossal loss. And into that strange situation, 24 companies arrive to argue that more of these ruinously expensive things should be given away to everyone for nothing. That is the puzzle. That is what we are going to unpick. But before any of it can make sense, I owe you a plain answer to a simple question, because the entire argument turns on one small word. What exactly is a weight? When one of these models is trained, it is shown an almost unimaginable amount of text, and it very slowly adjusts a vast collection of internal numbers, billions upon billions of them, nudging each one up or down, until the whole arrangement becomes eerily good at predicting what word should come next. Those numbers are the weights. And the crucial thing to understand is what the weights are not. They are not the computer code, which is comparatively short and simple. They are not the training data, the ocean of text the model learned from. The weights are the finished settings. They are the residue left behind after the learning is done, the thing the entire gigantic training process existed to produce. If you imagine the model as a brain, the weights are the precise strength of every single connection inside it. A trained model, stripped of everything else, is really just that, an enormous file full of numbers. Which leads directly to the term on the letterhead. An open-weight model is one where the company that trained it simply publishes that giant file of numbers and lets anyone download it and run it on their own machines for free. You do not rent it from them. You do not send your data to them. You hold the actual model in your hands. And on its face, that sounds like pure generosity, which is exactly why it deserves a second look. Because here is the first place I want to play devil's advocate, and it hides inside that word, open. Open weights are usually not open source, and the difference is not a technicality. When a company releases open weights, it typically hands you the finished numbers, but not the training data that shaped them, and not the full recipe used to produce them. You are given the destination, but not the map, and not the vehicle. You can use the model. You very often cannot truly reproduce it, or fully understand how it came to be. And the licenses underneath make the point sharper still. Many of these supposedly open models arrive with terms attached, restrictions on how large a company may be before it must pay, limits on what you may build, clauses about what you may not do. The word open is being asked to carry an enormous amount of weight. In practice, it frequently means this: open enough that you will build your business on top of it. Rarely open enough that you could ever turn around and threaten the people who gave it to you. So here is what we are going to do. First, the two layers of this entire industry and which of them actually makes any money. Then, the specific and rather old business strategy that explains NVIDIA's signature completely, along with the long history of companies that have run this exact play before. And finally, the honest part, where I stop being a devil's advocate and admit plainly which parts of that letter are simply unavoidably true. First up, the layers. The simplest way to see this whole business is as a building with two floors. On the top floor live the model makers, the famous names you read about, the ones locked in a public contest to build the smartest system. That floor is loud, glamorous, and, as we have seen, drenched in red ink. But underneath it, holding the whole structure up, is the ground floor. And the ground floor is compute, the specialized chips that every single one of those models, without exception, has to run on in order to do anything at all. NVIDIA lives on the ground floor. More than that, it is overwhelmingly the landlord of it. And the defining feature of the ground floor is beautifully simple. It does not care, even slightly, who wins upstairs. Consider the two movements. A model actually costs money to run. The first is training, the months of brutal computation that create the weights in the first place. The second is inference, every single time afterwards that the finished model answers a question. Both of those moments, the creation and the everyday use, happen on the same chips. The brilliant model and the mediocre one, the open model and the closed one, the winner and the loser, all of them burn the landlord's electricity. So while the tenants upstairs are locked in a knife fight with each other, spending themselves into oblivion to win, the landlord downstairs quietly collects rent from every last one of them, and from every visitor who ever comes to use what they built. And the rent is not modest. While the model makers upstairs set fire to billions, the company on the ground floor recently reported a gross margin north of 70%, and in a single 3-month stretch, took more than $60 billion from its data center business alone. Sit with that contrast for a moment. One floor is the largest money loser in modern technology. The floor beneath it is one of the most profitable businesses that has ever existed. And they are in the same building, in the same industry, feeding on the same boom. That is not a company hoping to win the AI race. It is a company that has already won it comprehensively by refusing to enter it. It sells the equipment to every runner, and it does not care who crosses the line first. Which brings us, at last, to the strategy, and it has a name. Once you know the name, you will see it everywhere for the rest of your life. It is called commoditize your complement. Now, a complement is simply anything that makes your own product more valuable. Cars and petrol are complements, razors and their blades, video game consoles and the games. When the complement to your product becomes cheaper and more abundant, demand for your product goes up because the two are used together. And for a company whose product is a chip that runs AI models, the complement, the thing used alongside the chip, is the models themselves. So follow the logic all the way down. If you sell the chips that AI runs on, you do not want a small number of expensive, jealously guarded models locked behind a few company doors and used sparingly. That would mean less AI running in the world, and therefore fewer of your chips needed. What you want is the precise opposite. You want models that are cheap, abundant, and absolutely everywhere. You want a gold rush. You want the whole world convinced there is treasure in the ground and digging for it feverishly all at once. And free, downloadable, open-weight models are the single most effective device ever invented for starting exactly that rush, because they drop a capable model into the lap of every startup, every university, every business on earth, each of whom must then come downstairs and rent the ground floor to actually run the thing. And if that sounds like a cynical reading, I want to show you that it is not remotely a new one, because this playbook is decades old. Years ago, IBM, a company that made its money from hardware and services, poured an enormous investment into Linux, a free operating system that it did not own and could not sell. Why would a hardware company fund free software? Because free software sold hardware. Cheap, ubiquitous Linux made the expensive machines IBM did sell more useful and more numerous. It commoditized the complement. Then came the purest example of all. Google gives away Android, the operating system on most of the world's phones, for nothing. It is not a charity. An open, free, everywhere phone system means more people on more phones, spending more time searching the web, and Google's actual business, the thing it truly sells, is search and the advertising around it. Android is the free complement that feeds the profitable core. Give away the thing next to the money to protect and grow the thing that is the money. That is the play. And open weight AI models are that same move, run again, at a scale the world has never seen. And now the sharpest edge of the devil's advocate, because there is a delicious irony sitting right at the center of this. The very same NVIDIA that signs a passionate letter about the virtues of openness runs as its own deepest competitive mode a piece of software called CUDA, which is famously, deliberately, and profitably closed. CUDA is the proprietary layer that locks developers onto NVIDIA's chips and makes switching to a rival painful. So the pattern, once you see it, is almost too neat. Be loud about openness, where openness sells your product. Stay absolutely silent about it, where openness would threaten your product. Open the models, which are your complement. Never ever open CUDA, which is your moat. So let us return to the letter and read its noble words through this ground floor lens. It frames the whole project as democratization, and that word, I think, is doing something quietly slippery. Because making the models cheap does not make the intelligence free, it simply moves the value. It shifts it, dollar by dollar, from the flow that is hemorrhaging money to the flow that is collecting the rent. Every single download of a free model is, whether anyone intends it or not, a small advertisement for the one thing in this entire industry that is not free and will never be free, which is the compute humming away underneath it. There is a second passage in the letter, dressed elegantly as principle, that I would push on just as hard. It argues, again and again, for keeping the frontier plural, for not allowing advanced AI to concentrate in too few hands. And stated like that, it sounds like a stirring stand against monopoly, the kind of thing it feels churlish to question. But look at it, once more, from the ground floor. A world with three enormous model companies is a world with three enormous customers. Customers that large can negotiate ferociously, they can demand discounts, and, most dangerously of all, they are big enough and rich enough to start designing their own chips and walking away. But a world with 1,000 small model companies is a world of 1,000 price takers, none of whom has a fraction of that leverage, and every one of whom must simply pay the going rate for the ground floor. Keeping the frontier plural genuinely is good for competition. It also, very conveniently, keeps the landlord's customers small, numerous, and weak. And then there is the argument about safety, which is the one that most deserves both respect and suspicion at the same time. The letter argues, reasonably, that openness makes AI safer, that a broad community can inspect open models, find their flaws, and that defenders need powerful models to fight attackers who already have them. Some of that is genuinely true. But a devil's advocate must note what open weights also mean for safety. Once those numbers are published, they cannot be recalled. They are loose in the world forever. And the safety guardrails trained into a model can often be stripped back out by anyone with modest resources and the raw weights in hand. Transparency of the weights sounds reassuring, right up until you remember that essentially nobody on earth can actually read billions of raw numbers and tell you what the model will do. There is even a quiet technical clause in the letter defending a practice called distillation, the art of using one model's outputs to help train another, cheaper one. You do not need the mechanism today. You only need to notice that it is precisely the technique that lets small players build capable models without paying for the most expensive training runs. More small models built more cheaply, spreading further. Which means, once again, more total AI running in the world on more chips. Even the fine print, it turns out, points downstairs. And there is one more layer to the costume, the outermost one, and it is stitched entirely from a flag. Notice how relentlessly the whole letter is wrapped in the language of American leadership, of winning the race against foreign rivals, of keeping a strategic technology safely at home. That framing is not an accident, because it is very close to the most effective wrapper a commercial request has ever been able to wear. It is extraordinarily hard to argue against a policy when opposing it can be made to sound unpatriotic. But hold the logic still for just a moment, because there is a tension inside it that the document is conspicuously careful never to name. Open weights, by their very nature, can be downloaded by anyone, anywhere, and that includes the exact foreign rivals the letter spends its opening warning you about. A model you publish to empower a startup in Ohio is a model you have, in the very same instant, published to a laboratory in Shenzhen. There are serious and reasonable answers to that tension. It is telling that a paper this polished, leaning this hard on national security, does not appear to want to discuss it. Now, to be fair, and here, as promised, I will genuinely stop playing devil's advocate, because the most dishonest thing I could do is leave you thinking this letter is a con. It is not. This is the part that lazy critics always skip, and it matters more than all my needling. Open source software really did build the modern internet, and the world is unquestionably richer for it. Concentrating the most powerful models on Earth behind 2 or 3 locked corporate doors really would be a serious danger, both to competition and to national security. And genuinely spreading capable AI into hospitals and farms and classrooms and small Main Street businesses really would do an enormous amount of good for an enormous number of people. These arguments are not counterfeit. Every one of them is a real, solid coin. It just so happens that they also spend beautifully well for the person handing them to you. And that, in the end, is the actual point I want to leave you with. And it is a good deal subtler than a simple gotcha. An argument does not become false, merely because the person making it happens to profit from it. If anything, the real danger runs the other way. The most difficult arguments in the world to judge clearly are the ones that are both true and enriching to their author at the same time, because their obvious truth does all the work of smuggling the self-interest past you quietly. While you are busy nodding along in agreement, the letter is a very good argument. That is not a reason to dismiss it. It is precisely the reason to handle it with care. And this is exactly why the list of names printed underneath the letter rewards a slow and careful read, because almost every single one of them has a reason that is entirely and understandably its own. The company that gives its own large model away for free does so, in no small part, to deny its rivals the ability to ever charge for theirs. The company that hosts the world's open models grows a little larger with every new one that is released. The open model laboratories are arguing, quite naturally, for the enduring value of the exact thing that they themselves make and sell. The venture firm has its money spread thickly across the entire board and wins if almost anyone does. Even the open source foundations, who are surely the most sincere names on the whole page, are advancing a worldview they have championed for decades. None of this, to be clear, is sinister. It is simply that a coalition is never a chorus of disinterested angels. It is a collection of very different appetites that happen this one time to be pointing in the same direction. But of every appetite gathered on that page, one of them is different, not in degree, but in kind. And that one is the real tell. All the others each need their own particular beg to come good. The model makers need their approach to be the one that wins. The application companies need their own product to sell. But NVIDIA does not need any single bet on that table to pay off, because NVIDIA quietly owns the table itself. It is the one signatory on the entire page that profits identically, whether open weights gloriously triumph or quietly fail, just so long as one single number, the total amount of AI being run anywhere in the world, simply keeps going up and to the right. And free models are the cheapest instrument ever devised for making that number climb. Which leads to the strangest conclusion of all, and the most unspoken. The money-losing labs on the top floor, burning through their billions to build extraordinary models that they then turn around and give away for nothing, are, in a very real and almost entirely undiscussed sense, subsidizing the one reliably profitable floor sitting directly beneath them. Their catastrophic losses are, functionally, the ground floor's marketing budget, and a healthy share of every dollar they set alight upstairs drifts gently downward and lands as rent. So let me leave you with the short version, the part actually worth carrying out of here. Takeaway 1. An open weight model gives away the numbers, but never the compute those numbers must run on, and that gap between the free thing and the thing that is never free is the entire game. Takeaway 2. NVIDIA sells that compute, which means it earns from every model ever run, open or closed, brilliant or useless, winner or loser, and it earns more the more AI the whole world runs. Takeaway 3. Giving models away is simply the fastest method ever found for making the world run more AI, which is why the company selling the shovels is, sincerely and self interestedly in the very same breath, urging everyone to dig. And takeaway 4, the one that matters most. The arguments in that letter are largely true. That is not a reason to trust them, it is a reason to read them wide awake. So, the next time the person who sells the shovels writes you a heartfelt, eloquent letter about how the gold really ought to be free for everyone, by all means read it carefully and take it seriously because he may very well be right. Free gold is often wonderful for almost everybody. Just keep one small, quiet fact lodged in the back of your mind the entire time you find yourself nodding along. Of every single person standing in that gold rush, the one selling the shovels is the only one who gets paid, whether or not a soul ever strikes it rich. He has known that from the beginning. And now, so do you.